mic
No,
too.
but we're going to talk about you. Caro and I, you know what? Do I need the mic?
Yes.
Do I need the mic? Okay. Caro and I are amazing friends. We've been, how long have we known each other?
Since 2008, I met you at Macondo.
Since 2008.
The writing space founded by Sandra Cisneros. I was a mocosa at the time, which means newbie.
Newbie.
And yes, and you were one of the seasoned writers, and I was
But you already knew what you were doing.
starstruck.
You already knew what you were doing back then. I remember. I remember that you already knew what you were doing. So, yeah, Caro stood up and gave an amazing reading from the Invisible Mountain. And I remember I turned to the person to my right in the audience and I whispered, "This person's going places." Because that's how captivated we all were. And it wasn't just me, we're all captivated by what Caro read. And it was like, I'm seeing somebody who, you know when you just know, like, I'm seeing somebody who's going to go on and write amazing things and change literature for the better. And I was right, because I'm always right. I'm kidding. Oh, no, kind of. But, you know, it's so great to be in conversation with you, my friend, and to share the space with you, to be here at Book Soup, to support independent bookstores, because they do need our support right now. And I also want to say that I think that this book landed at a very important time in our history because of what's happening right now in our country regarding the trans population and this administration's really fucking horrible treatment of trans individuals. So I think it's I think the universe kind of works in ways where it kind of, the books and the art that we need come out just when our souls are searching for them. So that's what I felt when I read this, is that I kind of felt like we need this book right now. And so, you know, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be having this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to jump in real quick and say, if I may, just first, thank you so much to Book Soup. This story is such a gem. Thank you all for being here and joining us, and let's all support Book Soup because y'all do magnificent things, and happy 50th birthday. Yeah, it's so wonderful. And then Alex, you know, I mean, I love you dearly as an amazing human being and also as a writer. Two of Alex's books are here, The Sons of El Rey, which is just this incredible intergenerational Latinx queerness. Like, it's just so gorgeous. I love that novel. And Cruising, an intimate
History of a Radical Pastime.
History of a Radical Pastime. I have taught that book, and it has really blown graduate student minds. So it is an incredible, and talk about essential books that we need, you know. So I just want to give my gratitude to you for being here.
There's a lot of me in that book, in so many ways. So.
There's so many silences in need of breaking.
Yeah. So anyway, I appreciate that. But let's talk about So Many Stars.
Okay.
I remember when you were working on it and we had a conversation about it on the phone. You know, one of the things that I'm just admire so much about your work is that you straddle so many different literary genres. You know, you've done historical, you've done, you've done translation. You know, you write these huge, complex landscapes that are just amazingly researched and, you know, very well thought out and organized. I'm curious, this anthology gathers an extraordinary range of voices. I mean, it was so difficult to pick just one that I felt was so moving because they were all so incredibly incisive and powerful. How'd you go about curating the contributors? Was there a guiding principle, or, you know, So Many Stars, was there a constellation, so to speak, that shaped who was invited and what kinds of stories you hope to include? Or did you just kind of like open it up and say, all right, let's see who's out there?
Yeah, thank you so much. So actually, I know this reads in some ways as an anthology because it's a collection of voices, but technically it's not an anthology. So I've learned a lot in the last few years about oral history as a literary genre, where it actually is the oral historian gatherer who kind of pulls the voices together and is positioned as the writer of the book rather than the editor of the voices, because these are spoken interviews that I then sort of translated from the written transcript of what people said onto the page. So it's a little different from somebody writing an essay or a piece about their life and then contributing it, because when we speak, we have one relationship to language, and people are so much more poetic and lyrical and textured and insightful when they speak than they often realize. People who aren't writers, who are in this book and have this inner wealth of lived experience as trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and two-spirit elders of color. But then they sort of give the language, and then I'm putting in sort of like the commas and the line breaks and the sort of distillation. Where is repetition serving? Where is it not? One of the people I learned a lot from was Svetlana Alexievich, who won the Nobel Prize in Literature for oral histories about Russian women in war, Voices of Chernobyl, and her work really blew my mind and sort of made me go, oh, wow. Here's like the way that there can be an artistry in honoring people's spoken words and lived stories. So in terms of how I created the contributors, this grew out of an oral history project that was founded by a writer and MacArthur Fellow, Jacqueline Woodson. And with her nonprofit, Baldwin for the Arts, she got funding to give fellowships to writers across the country to gather the oral histories of elders of color. And she reached out to me and offered me a fellowship, specifically to gather the stories of queer and trans BIPOC elders of the West Coast.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I developed a list myself of people, of contributors, people to interview, from my own networks, asking my own networks who I needed to talk to or reach out to, doing my own research. There were people I reached out to directly, not having my own contact with them. Like, for example, Bambi Salcedo, who's here in Los Angeles, who's the founder of and current executive director of the Trans Latina Coalition, and is an absolute icon in trans community and in trans Latina community. I was so thrilled that she said yes to an interview. So it was a combination of things in terms of how I listened for which voices to include, and I strove to create a balance of representation and different kinds of experiences.
Oh, wow. So was there, and like I said, they're all just incredible. They're incredibly detailed. They're so intimate. There were times that I felt like I was sitting across from the people that you were interviewing, and they were talking to me.
Oh, good.
Right? That's how intimate it felt.
I'm so glad.
And so Bambi, who's somebody that I know, it was so interesting to read Bambi's experiences and see her from a different angle. Right?
Oh, yeah.
So that was very enlightening for me. I guess my next question is there one person that you interviewed whose story stuck with you? Is there one specific?
I mean, everybody's story really stuck with me.
So you can't really say.
I don't know, because I feel like it's such a good question, but different stories stuck with me in really different ways. And different people had different things to contribute. So the book is arranged with thematic chapters. And so there's people who, did a great deal of activism in the AIDS crisis, and so their voice is very alive in the AIDS crisis chapter. And then there's people, and some of those people's voices are not at all present in the chapter on the art and power of drag.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Because that's not a place where their sort of life expression and contribution to the innovation of culture was really activated.
Active, yeah.
But for other people, it's very activated in that space. And so, some people shared a great deal about their own relationship to transition, physical and social, what they have chosen and not chosen to do. Other people didn't share, which is entirely their right. And so in that chapter, again, it's the voices that, that sort of organically make sense in that space. But one of the things about oral history compared to other forms of interview, because these days, right, we have podcasts, we're so lucky, we have documentaries, we have all kinds of places. And Bambi, if we'll just go back to the example of Bambi Salcedo, she's been interviewed a lot. There's a whole documentary about her, and she's also in the HBO Translist documentary. And of course, I watched all of that to prepare for the interview. But those interviews can often be very quick, like where'd you grow up and what was it like? And oral history, as fellows, we got training from oral historians, and we kind of learned these things about the the pacing, the slowness. There's a room for intimacy in the way that you talk to people, the hovering in the pause.